So today is our 7th webinar of 8, which means we only have one more. We have one more webinar of this learning journey next week. And what we have been feeling among the host team as this learning journey has progressed is that having just more concreteness and more of a sense of, as human beings, how do we go about making changes and what are different ways we might live or we might make choices can really help us to ground some of the deep, I might call them inquiries, you could call them deep challenges, but deep inquiries, spaces of exploration that we have to figure out to be able to become earth regenerators. And something that happened here in Bar HR this week, which took a lot of my time, is we had a wonderful visitor named Willem Verweerde, who is from Holland, and he is the founder and director of a wonderful organization called Common Land Foundation. And for those of you who don't know Common Land, I consider them to be like best in the world at large-scale landscape regeneration. And I say that because the other organization that I would give that title to is Eco Agriculture Partners, and the two of them collaborate on most of their projects. So it's sort of like pick whichever one you want to talk about. But Common Land does beautiful work at facilitating the conditions for emergence on landscapes of 100,000 hectares or larger, and on timescales of 20 years or larger. And I'll actually talk a little bit about Common Land in the presentation today, because I'll draw inspiration from some of the activities we did this week when Willem was here. And Willem was here on vacation. So he and his wife came here to get away from things, but I knew that they were looking for their first territory to work with in Colombia. We've been talking for 2.5 years about bringing him here. And it just turned out really nicely that we could organize tourist activities for them to experience landscape scale regeneration in Colombia, and just ended up in a really deep and beautiful weave and flow with Willem and his lovely wife, Petra. And so we're gonna weave a little bit of that in and you'll get some of the taste. But what I wanna do right now, first to say, hey, Dan, it's lovely to have you here. Been thinking of you. As I talked to Nelson today, Nelson may or may not make an appearance in today's presentation. Dan knows who I'm talking about. The rest of you will momentarily. I want to go ahead and start this presentation because in this presentation, this is one of those moments where I just get to celebrate how good my life is. Let me tell you what I mean by that. I'm going to tell you about beautiful people that I'm lucky enough to call my friends. And having friends like these people makes a pretty amazing life. And so I just want to show you, it's almost like you can imagine being me around all of these amazing people. And then you'll know what it feels like to be an earth regenerator is to be in community like this. And so I'm going to show you lots of earth regenerators and give you little stories about them. I want you to imagine, what must it feel like to be Joe, knowing all of these people? What does it feel like to be in a community of earth regenerators? And that'll really start to help give us a deeper sense of the quality of this way of living and how rich it is. And so with that said, I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation. It turned out it was really easy to put this presentation together because I just had to find pictures of my friends. So I want to start with this sort of enigmatic question. What really is an earth regenerator? We named the study group for my book, Earth Regenerators. It grew into a global online community, like 4,018 of us when I checked this morning, who are members of Earth Regenerators. So what does it mean to be an earth regenerator? And a good place to start is to notice what's happening in this picture. That is a tropical cedro, a tropical cedar tree. Cedar trees in the tropics are very different from cedars in high latitudes. And that's me taking this cedar tree from our tree nursery and getting ready to put it in the ground. And you might notice this really goofy grin on my face. That's because I have a goofy grin. That's just the way my grin looks. But why am I grinning? It's because my friend Sebastian Meisner, who's also a member of Earth Regenerators, loves to take pictures of people in moments where he sees them shining. And he saw me so happy planting this little tree that he just snapped off a picture. And then later when he sent it to me, I was like, oh my God, Sebastian, your photos are amazing. And they are, his photos are amazing. And what I want you to notice here is that if you replace that tree with someone named Elise, my daughter, the feeling of the picture would probably be pretty similar. Here I am just giving love to this little baby tree. I'm like changing the baby's diaper, right? I'm about to take the plastic bag off and put the roots in the soil. It's like taking my baby out of her clothes and putting her in a bath. Now that feeling, that juxtaposition of what it feels like to be planting a tree and what it feels like to be raising my daughter, the fact that for me, those feel the same is an indicator that maybe I'm an earth regenerator. So we'll come back to that. I wanted to show you a couple of earth regenerators. That handsome man with the really nice musculature there is our friend Tyler. He's as popular with the ladies as you might imagine. Tyler comes and watches it, he'll laugh. And that's our friend Thomas standing next to him. Thomas, who has been studying agroforestry and agroecology and may actually show up on this webinar because I think he's been attending some of the sessions. And then that's Elise there in the middle of the hole. What I want you to notice is what earth regenerators do, which is that we do things like dig holes. But why do we do it? We do it so that a mere 10 months later, the same place looks like this. This is 10 months later, less than a year. Let me just go back and show it to you again. What an earth regenerator does is they enter a space where there's less life and they bring more life. They bring more life in diversity. They bring more life in amount. They bring more life in interconnection, and they bring more life in connection. Because my ability to connect to the land when it looks like this is much richer than it was when it looked like this. Can you count how many flowers are in this picture? I'll give you a hint. It's less than one. I can't find a single flower in that picture. Can you count how many flowers are in this picture? And the answer is no, there are too many. And the ones far away are too small for me to see. So if there are all those flowers, you could try and guess how many bees are there, how many wasps, how many hummingbirds. And if there are bees and wasps and hummingbirds, how many lizards, and how many spiders, how many frogs, how many serpents. See, an earth regenerator is someone who relates to the land in a way that brings more life. And they do it mindfully and intentionally. And sometimes there's a delay between the action and the outcome. In this case, 10 months between the first picture and the second. I saw this morning and I just love this quote. See, knowing that you love the earth changes you. It activates you to defend and protect and celebrate. But when you feel that the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms the relationship from a one-way street into a sacred bond. Now, Robin Wall Kimmerer, as many of you know, is both a botanist and an indigenous woman from the tribes of North America. And when she started entering into her indigenous spirituality as a trained biologist, she realized that her love of plants deepened and her ability to know them broadened. And she found that she could study a plant as a scientist and look at the chemistry of its molecules and other things like a scientist would do, but she could relate to it as a human. She could relate to the plant as a being and enter into a two-way relationship. And I want to emphasize that this sacred bond is so important. That picture on the left is another photo of the same hole that we had dug. I showed you pictures before and after. This is an intermediate moment after we'd planted a couple of things and some grass was starting to grow and it had rained and water had filled part of it. And what I want you to know is that I have a sacred relationship to this hole. Because this hole that made a water retention pond was not only the place where we brought bushes and shrubs and trees and bees and wasps and hummingbirds, it was also the place where I brought my pain and my solitude and my loneliness as I was going through a deep and difficult time in my life. And I formed a sacred bond to this piece of land. And it's very helpful that the shape of a water hole is also the shape of a womb. That's not by accident, by the way. If you think about how all life emerged in the ocean, and without the invention of eggs or placentas, just basically ocean contained in something outside of the ocean, creating an ocean environment for the newborn offspring, without bringing the ocean onto land in some form, in the form of a womb or an egg, we can't have life on land. So if I create a hole in the land in the shape of a womb, the water fills it. And as the water fills it, it makes a womb for life, which is why it looks like this. Because this is not just a hole, this is a womb. Notice how wombs are sacred. Wombs are places where life is created. It's not just a hole. The relationship is two-way. When I entered the womb by digging this retention pond, I was reborn. I was reborn as a child of this place. The ability to form a sacred bond is what makes us earth regenerators. So what is a sacred bond? What is the sacred bond you can see in this photo between what is probably the mother and the newborn baby, though it's someone who loves that baby? What does a sacred bond tell us about how do we relate to belonging? If I'm going to be an earth regenerator, or if you're going to be an earth regenerator, what is your sacred bond? And how does it tell you where you belong? And if you don't know where you belong, what sacred dimension of yourself is not being expressed? Maybe you always wanted to be a dancer. Maybe you always wanted to be a writer. Maybe you always wanted to be a mother. Maybe you always wanted to be a father. Is there some part of you that has not been expressed as a sacred bond between yourself and the rest of the world? And that's why you don't know where you belong. You see, becoming an earth regenerator is learning where we belong and then caring for that place as a sacred bond. Just as those of us who've had children, when we're holding our newborn baby in our hands, we feel the sacred relationship of that vulnerable new life created by us, whether intentional or accidental, created by us, and we're responsible for it. This sense of gratitude and responsibility combined together create the expression of the sacred. It's gratitude and responsibility. This is Sassy, Maria Cecilia, my lovely friend. That dog is Samba. Samba is as adorable as she looks. Sassy is more adorable than she looks. You've got to hear her talk. She's got a contagious, beautiful energy. Sassy is getting out of the car on Wednesday morning to meet us to go visit several parts of the territory with my friend Willem from Common Land. And as she's about to get out of the car, Samba is so excited to join us, she can't wait for the door to open and she jumps out the window. And in the moment when Samba is trying to leap from the car, Sassy is giggling beautifully, and I snapped this photograph. Why do I tell you that Sassy is an earth regenerator? Because she's a woman who all of her life has cared so much.
Oh God. Come on, let's go.
Gail, if you could please mute your, thank you very much. Thank you. Gail, if you could please mute your microphone. Thank you. Sassy cared so much about communication, for helping people understand each other, that she actually specialized in mass communication and went on to create a television show about sustainability and sustainable solutions till she became disillusioned with it and continued deepening her search into herself. Sassy is one of the women here in Barichara who is helping to manage all of our syntropic agroforestry workshops and also translating the materials from Portuguese into Spanish and improving them pedagogically so that it's easier to communicate the insights about the unique ecology of the native forest that we're growing and the principles and practices of syntropic agroforestry that relate to our forest. And so while you see Sassy here in a car, which is built by petroleum and driven by gasoline, and there are lots of things you'd say maybe are not regenerative, but she's arriving in this love of expression for the territory to help weave the connections between people for us to spread reforestation across this territory and to create educational materials to spread this knowledge in Spanish across all of Latin America. So one thing you can learn about an earth regenerator is you can't tell from where they're sitting what their relationship is to the earth. But what you can tell is by the joy on her face and the purity that tells you about the love in her heart, that she is indeed someone who acts from the sacred. And that's my friend Sassy. Sassy is looking on from the background in this picture with her partner Tanya to her right. just to the left of me. Margarita's to the right in the picture. And the woman here in the center is Natalia. Nata, Nati, nuestra Natalia. Natalia is such an incredible.
Regular Saturday morning webinar that Joe gives, and I just tuned into it. I asked where my phone was.
Scale, could you please mute yourself? I'm gonna actually.
Oh my
Yeah, I can help with this.
my God.
Let me do this, because this will help us out. There we go. I'll just come back here and then go back. That makes it way easier. So what I want to tell you about Natalia is Natalia has devoted her life to two things: the empowerment of human beings to care for nature and biodiversity. She's one of those people that so deeply cares about biodiversity that she spent 8 years living with the Kogis, the amazing indigenous people of Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, learning their sacred ways to connect herself deeply into the world of conservation as it relates to spiritual practice. And she's a systems entrepreneur. She's the kind of person that can dream like a shaman dreams of wisdom and truth. She dreams of systemic ways for humans to come together and transform their lives in their communities. And she's been doing this for more than 25 years. And when she came to Barichara just before the pandemic started to be with her partner Yvonne, she came to escape her former life with international NGOs, working with groups like Conservation International, so that she could connect deeply into her body and recover from what it was like to live in those bureaucracies. But when the pandemic started and they saw all of their neighbors didn't have money to buy food because the local tourism economy shut down, Natalia and Yvonne set to work gathering 16 of their neighbors, 16 fincas, 16 farms, gathering them on their neighbors' land to create a community garden, to create food, subsistence, and resilience during the time of the pandemic. And that same community garden next week is about to have a syntropic agroforestry workshop where we're going to train the women from the 16 families that created that garden. We're going to train them on how to create food forests. Natalia is the kind of person that feels so much love for life that she will enter a crisis and transform it in service to life. She does it with an adeptness and an agility that is absolutely stunning and disorienting to observe. She is indeed an earth regenerator. This is Willem Verwerda, our lovely friend from Amsterdam. He's standing here at the end of a hike down an ancestral footpath to the village of Guane. This is a photo I took on Thursday just before we arrived to have lunch. Willem told me a story yesterday. When I told it to Penny, she gasped. Maybe you will too. Willem has been the president of the IUCN, which is the United Nations organization devoted to protection of biodiversity. He's a tropical ecologist who studied ecology in Colombia in the early 1980s. He created the first ecotourism company in Colombia. He helped set up conservation projects and community engagement projects in countries all over the planet, and then eventually realized that setting up projects wasn't good enough. And around the year 2012, he left his role as the president of the IUCN and spent a year interviewing his wealthy friends who donate to conservation and campesinos or country people all over the planet about what most frustrates them and what is their dream of the future. And from those dialogues in about 15 different countries, he envisioned Common Land Foundation, which is now the best large-scale ecosystem restoration project on Earth. They're working in 15 countries, and with us after this week, we'll soon add Colombia as the 16th. And he's amazing. What I want you to notice is he might be an old man in this picture, but look at that child beaming out of his face. Walking with him on a trail in this tropical dry forest was like walking with a child through Toys R Us. Every 5 feet, he had to stop and poke around in the bushes to find another bromeliad, a native orchid he'd never seen before, a bird gathered in the tree that he thinks he can identify. This is a person who loves life so much. There's actually a tropical frog in Colombia that's named after him. He isn't even the one who discovered it. Someone else wanted to honor him with its name. But I want to tell you a story that he told me yesterday. He said, did I tell you how I got started in all of this work? And I was like, no. He said, I was 7 years old, living in Holland, and I saw my very first wild snake. It was a garter snake, one of those garden variety snakes that's completely harmless, small little green thing. And there were 2 Italian men that were so afraid of that snake that they grabbed sticks and they started beating it until they eventually killed the snake. And he said, you know, snakes have eyelids that come from the back to the front. And when the snake was scared, it couldn't close its eyes. And the snake was just staring at me. He said, as a 7-year-old boy looking into the eyes of that snake, I asked from inside myself, not with words, I asked the snake, why are they hitting you? What he said was that this knowing rose up within him as the snake answered without words. They're not hitting me. They're hitting themselves. Can you imagine? 7 years old. The snake spoke to him to say, these Italian men are afraid of snakes because they don't know the snake is them. They don't have the sacred bond. They don't know that they are part of the earth, and they're afraid. And this little boy, who's more than 60 years old, with that beaming face, playing in the bushes as we walk through the Andes of Colombia, is still speaking for the snake. He's still listening. He's an earth regenerator. This is Angela. Angela is an architect. She's built buildings. She's designed hotels. But now she's an architect of something else. She's an architect of how to preserve local cultural knowledge in the ancestral lands of the Guane people here in Barichara by setting up a learning center for cultural exchanges, to have the children trained by indigenous teachers in natural building construction, in basket weaving, in indigenous ceremonial houses, in natural fibers, in textiles for clothing, in natural clothing dyes. And right here she is in a photo we took a couple weeks ago, where I told you about the regenerative exchanges for us to do syntropic agroforestry and to stop erosion on her land, in exchange for her to provide housing for the teacher of syntropic agroforestry. She's smiling like this because we arrived. She's smiling like this because she and her family bought this land, and she's been trying to protect the land from being turned into another hotel, the kind of hotel she herself might have designed earlier in her life. She's a guardian and a steward and a protector of land, and a guardian and a steward and a protector of children, and a guardian and a steward and a protector of ancestral knowledge. Angela also is an earth regenerator. And here is Paco. Paco is a musician. He's a musician that I've never heard play music, but I've seen the music of reforestation that he can do. Because as a musician, he felt the deep harmony of the connection between movement, the body, and spirituality. And so there came a point when he left Colombia and went to Brazil. And he learned about syntropic agroforestry. And he learned that there's a harmony in space and time, just like the harmony of movement and music. There's a harmony in space and time for plants as they grow into a forest. And he learned syntropic agroforestry. Paco is our teacher of syntropic agroforestry. And here you can see him. This is an activity we did on Wednesday to take what our other friend, I'll introduce in a moment, our friend Carlos, he described this place as an ojo de desierto, eye of the desert, a place where there's bare rock and clay that if you don't intervene and cover it with foliage, the desert will spread. And we were asked to take 1 square meter of land, 3 feet by 3 feet, and imagine what it would look like reforested, and take objects from the forest that we gathered on the walk and place them in this 1 square meter to imagine what it would mean to stop the spread of the desert and to start the spread of the forest. And here's Paco placing a leaf, pretending it's a tree, showing us how you would add mulch to accelerate the growth of the trees by creating ground cover around their base. See how much he's like a father to a child? with that tree, kind of like me in the beginning. See, Paco is making music with the plants. He too is an earth regenerator. This is Carlos Gomez. It was on Carlos's regenerative agroforestry land that Paco was doing that activity. Here on the left is where Carlos has restored the sacredness of a place where water is born from the land. In Colombia, they don't call it a wellspring, they call it a nacimiento del agua, a birthplace of water. And they have made this place sacred by cleaning it and recovering it. And yes, that is a pipe coming out of the hillside, and it is potable water. The land cleans the water so well that you can drink it directly from the spout. And so Carlos took a native tree called totumo, which is used to make these little wooden spoons. And he took the totumo, which is a type of plant used for making dishes by the indigenous Guane people of our territory. And he's inviting us to drink water from the wellspring, to feel the sacred connection of water to life in a place where the sacredness has been restored. On the right, just a few minutes later, Carlos is showing us how to make a hormone mixture to mix with compost and spread among the plants to speed up reforestation. And what you can't see in this picture, because it's over to the side, is that they took a type of plant called guadua, which is a cousin of bamboo. Bamboo, for those of you who don't know, is the fastest growing plant on earth. Bamboo is a type of grass. And the plant grows so fast because there are growth hormones in it. So if you cut off a section of guadua or bamboo, at the time when it's shooting up in its most rapid growth, it's full of growth hormones, naturally occurring. He took a machete and chopped the guadua into little pieces, and he's mixing it with these other ingredients to make a growth hormone soup for the guadua to speed up the growth of the rest of the forest. So it turns out that you can use a non-industrial, non-chemical way of introducing chemicals from one plant to another, but here we don't call it chemistry, we call it medicine. The guadua brings medicine to the compost, which brings medicine to the forest, and Carlos is the medicine man. Carlos also is an earth regenerator. This woman in the pink shirt, standing next to Ceci, is named Somara. Somara is a member of a local organization called Mujer y Vida, which translates into English as Woman and Life, which is a network of about 50 families of campesinos, a group of women all across the territory who care about food sovereignty and food resilience. And Somara, who's only been in Barichara for 4 years, is the current president of the organization. What you can see on the right with Margarita in the background is a project that was set up with a distillery. That big pot you see sitting over the fire with the wood is actually distilling dried fruit to make essential oils, which they can sell for a high price in the town, just like you'd buy them at Whole Foods or some other place, or those little tiny bottles of extracts of different fruits and different herbs. She's making them from waste materials, from extra fruit that couldn't be sold at market, that would have zero value, and turning it into a high value product sold to the tourists, drying them in an inverted refrigerator that Margarita's standing by, where they've gutted out all the electronics and replaced it with a heating tube, so that as they burn the fire to make the distilled essential oil extracts, they're also dehydrating fruit that becomes part of the granola that Margarita sells. And this little system, which only cost a few $100s to make, is helping a group of about a dozen women create independent businesses from waste products on their farms. So Somara is an entrepreneur and a businesswoman and a community leader. She also has shade-grown coffee. She has a biodigester. She has 3 pigs and about 7 chickens. And those 3 pigs and 7 chickens produce enough manure to create gas from the biodigester, methane gas, that she can cook all of the food for her family. She's been creating an integrated permaculture system on 1 hectare of land while helping prototype business models for members of her community to turn waste into money while creating livelihoods for themselves. She too is an earth regenerator. This is Oscar. Oscar, you can see if you can read it on the screen to his right, says Fundación Cultural Ojo de Agua, the cultural foundation for the eye of water. Oscar and his wife Emilce, who I'll show you in a moment, have been doing the most incredible work with theater and with cinema. They have been working with children, as you can see on the screen, the little boy with the camera and the old man, as projects with campesino children. They teach the children how to conduct interviews and then give them a camera. And the children conduct interviews about whatever they care about. And those interviews become so powerful that they turn them into documentaries. And what you can see on that screen, the little boy interviewing the old man, is a story that Oscar told us about a place called Boyacá, close to Bogota, where there was child abuse in almost every home. And the children interviewed each other about the child abuse, and they interviewed the adults about child abuse, and they interviewed the grandparents about child abuse, and they made a movie. And then they invited the entire community to come. And Oscar told us a story of the power of cinema, the power of theater, that the little girl who had told the most abusive stories of what her father did to her came to the showing opening night with her father. This stern man sitting there tight with muscles clenched, angry and uncomfortable the whole time the movie's going on. And at the end of the movie, this man stands up and he's this big, tough guy, and he looks really upset. And Oscar's thinking, oh my God, is he gonna hit me like he hits his daughter? And the man turns and walks outside. Oscar follows him and he starts to cry. And then he comes back inside, walks up to Oscar and he says, what happened to those children is what happened to me. There was a healing elixir for intergenerational trauma by a child holding a camera. Oscar and Emilce are building a theater beside their house. It's being constructed, we visited it on Wednesday, for the children to make film and theater and perform for their community. And Oscar and Emilce teach the children how to create these stories. But the children pick the stories that they want. This is Emilce telling more of the story, describing what it was like when they asked the children what they wanted to explore, and the children wanted to explore why all the water went away. And they quickly learned the water went away during the time of violence, when neighbor killed neighbor for 30 years in this territory, in a very violent and dark period. But somehow the violence ended. The children wanted to know why. So as an elementary school film project, children in elementary school, they went and asked the old men, how did they create the peace? And after interviewing them, the story was so powerful that they had to continue after school got out. And these children spent the entire summer interviewing the elders. And they created a documentary. It's about 45 minutes long. You can find it on YouTube. It's in Spanish, but it's got English subtitles. It's called Paz Anónimo, the anonymous peace. The story of how the third generation of men engaging in the violence, when they saw their own children starting to continue the violence, they intervened and they constructed their own peace process. And now the children, with Emilce and Oscar, are starting to bring the water back. Later in the day, we met 28 children who are protecting 26 of those nacimientos del agua, 26 places where the water comes from the ground, as guardians of the land, as projects they did from these film projects caused them to want to be guardians of their water. And they have told the story of the construction of peace, which is helping more people to restore the water with their neighbors, as there's been distrust that's continued for decades, even after the peace returned. And Emilce and Oscar are cultural regenerators of epic proportions. See, in this picture, I want to share something personal, because that's a photograph of my mother on the left. That's a picture when I was a kid. It's my mom baking some cookies. You can see what kind of mom I had. She's a lovely soul. That's my daughter on the right. And see, to be an earth regenerator is to bring the love we have for our mother forward to those we birth into the world. So if I'm going to be an earth regenerator, I have to honor and venerate my ancestors. My mother died more than 10 years ago. She's one of my ancestors. At least we'll never get to meet her grandmother. But do you know what my daughter can know? She can know my mother through the way that I love my daughter. And we earth regenerators will have this kind of sacred bond to the past and to the future. So we can say, hi, Mom, I love you, to the only mother any of us really have. There's only one great mother, who's the mother of all mothers. Your mother was birthed by this mother, and so was mine. And until we remember this, we cannot be earth regenerators. To be earth regenerators is to remember home. And home, remember the question when I showed you that newborn baby, belonging. We belong where we're from. We belong where we're loved. We are from the earth. We are loved by the earth. How do I know that? Because if I can love you and I am part of the earth, then you are loved by the earth, plain and simple. So as we love the earth, we love ourselves. As we let ourselves be loved, the earth in all of her myriad expressions will love us. And the most powerful love we'll receive from the earth will be from her humans because of the way we evolved. This was a sacred contract that we created at the beginning of Earth Regenerators. It was not shared with the members of Earth Regenerators. It was shared with a community that we called the Community Regenerators cohort. And we asked them if they would make this pledge. And we had a lot of discussion about it. And then later I wrote a post on Earth Regenerators inviting everyone to make this pledge, but as is typical, it just went down the newsfeed and disappeared to the bottom and is somewhere buried from about 2 years ago. But this is what it says. I pledge to honor the earth, entering into this sacred covenant during a time of human-caused planetary collapse. By joining the Earth Regenerators, I enter a gift economy of service to Gaia, giving sustenance to others who share this service, as I too receive sustenance for the service I freely give. Now, what you might notice is all of us entered into this agreement by joining the learning journey. Each of us came making a donation to the Barichara Regeneration Fund to enter into a place of giving and receiving of gifts. And we've been giving and receiving our gifts for 7 weeks in this learning journey. We didn't have to name the sacred contract to be in it, but when we name it, it gains power. So I ask you, is this a pledge that you would make? And how do you feel about this? Would you enter in such a clear and strong declaration of your love and mutual service to life on earth? I want to talk a little bit about the larger context of being an earth regenerator by what's called the 1,000 Landscapes Project. 1,000 Landscapes for 1 billion people, which is hosted by eco-agricultural partners with a lot of other organizations, including Common Land. And what they're doing is they are mapping out, and they've been doing this, they announced this in January of 2021. It's when they made it public. So it's a year and a half old. They identified 1,000 landscapes, that if all 1,000 landscapes were regenerated, that we would restore stability to the Earth's biosphere, that we would start to turn around climate change, that we would begin to return from the planetary boundaries that we've crossed. 1,000 landscapes. Now, if you remember when we talked about bioregions, there's an overlap between what they call landscapes and what we call bioregions. See, when I stood here with Willem yesterday saying goodbye, we were discussing how our landscape would join these 1,000, and that we're going to enter into a relationship about landscape restoration, collaborating in the way that Common Land does. And Willem told me a story that when Common Land started in 2012, they began with 4 landscapes. Because they work on each landscape for a minimum of 20 years, before they could begin, Willem had to find the money to support core teams in all 4 landscapes and the core team of the foundation. So that's 5 core teams for 20 years at an average of $500,000 per year per landscape, which means he had to raise about $2.5 million per year for 20 years. Do the math. He raised $60 million before he could begin. So they could have 4 demonstration projects, 4 landscapes that they could prove and demonstrate that this approach works. With the larger vision that as these 4 landscapes grew to 8, and currently they're up to 15, that they would eventually find 50 more landscapes. That unlike the first 4 that they support entirely by finding all of the funding to help them, the other 50 landscapes are able to collaborate with Common Land to find funding, to generate funding themselves, to get help to find funding, but the Common Land isn't going to find all of it for them. And then we would collaborate to create a network of these landscapes. Right now there are 15, and it seems likely after this week that the territory around Barichara is going to be number 16, and we'll start looking for the support to sustain our work for 20 years. But this is part of the 1,000 landscapes, the 1,000 landscapes project. That the 1,000 landscapes project is grounded in 4 anchor projects that have been going for 8 to 10 years. And then 15 additional projects that have been going for less time. Our project in Barichara, you could say, has been going in this form since I arrived, but there have been regenerative projects here for decades. And so what you can start to see is that being an earth regenerator is to nest yourself within a larger story, the story of an entire landscape, embedded within a network of landscapes, embedded within an entire planetary system. Remember when I said this, that we need to create bioregional networks on every continent? The 1,000 landscapes model is one way to do that. The way that I've talked about bioregional learning centers is another, but you could see that they can be the same, because each bioregional learning center could be helping manage one of those 1,000 landscapes. It's the same. We just use different language and different lenses, but we have to create these across the planet. So to be an earth regenerator is to hold the awareness of the entire planet while focusing in on our own landscape or bioregion, while living within our own sacred bonds to where we belong and our personal relationship to that place. Which is why finding your place and figuring out where you belong is going to be essential to being an earth regenerator. And you might recall that zooming in from the planetary scale allows you to do things like this. Here are 3 different levels. The level of South America as a continent, organized around the Andes Mountains and the drainage basin of the Amazon, with different river systems within it. So below the continent level are river basins. Within each river basin is a local network of projects. And if that local network of projects is actually an integrated network, it functions as a holistic landscape, and it can be one of the 1,000 landscapes. And if you are working in one of those projects, then you are concretely participating to planetary regeneration of the Earth by participating in this nested system. And this is why being an earth regenerator is different from being a gardener or different from being a school teacher. Because without this planetary context, we cannot grapple with planetary collapse. And if we cannot grapple with planetary collapse, we'll be confused and lost and overwhelmed by the collapses that will hit us where we are, because they will definitely hit us wherever we are. But as an earth regenerator, we know about planetary collapse. We understand what's needed at a planetary scale, and we do our part where we are locally. And that's what makes us an earth regenerator and not just a garden regenerator and not just a school regenerator. Earth regenerator means the planet. And this is how we do it. So what is an earth regenerator? Why is it that me planting this beautiful tropical cedro makes me an earth regenerator? Because I did it in the bioparque as part of a network, integrating itself across the landscape, knowing that we're forming a network of bioregions across the planet, and that I can form a sacred bond with the entire planet where I place this tree. That sacred bond with the entire earth allows me to devote my life to healing the entire planet. So an earth regenerator forms a sacred bond to the place they are, devoting their life to the entire planet through these nested levels of awareness. Simply by holding the awareness, we behave differently. We don't have to do everything for the watershed, or to do everything for the continent, or to do everything for the planet. We just have to know how our part fits. And then I can plant this baby tree and know that I'm making a difference. This is why people don't think their local actions make a difference, because they don't understand how to coordinate it to create a collective impact. But if you understand that this is the way we organize ourselves, local projects organized as long-term processes for landscapes and territories. Those landscapes and territories networked across continents and across the planet, that's how we become earth regenerators. You may recall this graphic from our first webinar where I said, these are the earth regenerators, and that it's not the people on this extreme exemplar of unsustainability, because we're not going to try and stop this. The people trying to stop this may be environmental activists, climate marchers, and all kinds of things, but they are not earth regenerators because they don't have the nested, fractal perspective of how healing themselves in their local place heals the planet. Because if someone is continuing the unsustainable system without knowing it, they have lost their sacred bond to the earth. And if they've lost their sacred bond to the earth, how can they help regenerate it? But wait. Yes, the model's to emulator here, but wait. If earth regenerators are the people who live into love of the earth as part of the earth, then is this guy an earth regenerator? This is Nelson. Nelson is the man we're buying the land Las Albercas from. We're buying Las Albercas from Nelson. Nelson is a land hoarder and a land speculator. I don't know how much of the territory he owns, at least 100 properties. He's very wealthy and very powerful. I sometimes describe him as a member of the local mafia because that's pretty accurate. So is he an earth regenerator? Is he acting out of love for the earth as part of the earth? We negotiated to buy Las Albercas as an intense negotiation from land sharks trying to gouge us for as much money as they could get. It wasn't very regenerative. But today, I met with Nelson and we had a coffee together because we needed to extend the time for the purchase of Las Albercas. The money is going to arrive, and we'd had some things that happened that made it unclear if the money would be able to come or if it could come in time. And we've been really nervous about it for a couple of months. The money is now going to arrive, but not quite with enough time to meet our agreements. So I met with him for coffee this morning to extend our time to make the payment. It was so easy to make that agreement. He just said, let's just do this. Does that sound good? I said, yeah, that sounds good. And then we spent the next 40 minutes of him asking me questions about what we're doing in Barichara. How does the territorial foundation work? What are you going to do with the land above Las Albercas? How's that going to help the people in the land below Las Albercas? And I started teaching him regenerative economics. Started explaining to him the story of Sumara, who you just saw, the story of Carlos Gomez, the story of Paco, and what we're doing. And there came a moment when Nelson said to me, thank you so much for coming to my territory. I'm so glad you're here. And as we parted ways, he gave me this deep hug. Land shark mafia boss to the guy hugging me for healing his territory. He didn't know it, but he was participating in earth regeneration. Because Las Albercas is the land where we're going to birth Barichara Ecoversity. And Nelson has been an essential collaborator in that process. And you know what? By the end, with Nelson's children and grandchildren, I'm willing to bet that he's going to become an earth regenerator. So I wanted to share that with you. The question is, are you an earth regenerator? Do you understand what it means to devote yourself to the healing of planetary health? Do you know what it means to feel across those nested levels of action? Do you know what it means to change the way you make decisions about who you relate to and how you focus and what you prioritize your time for? Are you an earth regenerator? That's what we can discuss now. And so here we are. For me, it's really helpful to see some earth regenerators. To know that we come in many different shapes and sizes, and some of us don't even know that we are yet. It's the way we grow into love that matters. So what I ask is, what does this prompt in you? What does it move in you? Does it help you better understand how to enter into those multi-capital exchanges, those different kinds of value that we each carry, and how to relate to each other? Does it help you see that sharing your knowledge or giving someone emotional support can help them to weave a territory for a landscape? Do you start to see how being an earth regenerator is a nested web of relationships? And does this help us know how? That's my question. But what are your questions? I'd love to hear. For anyone who has a question or a reflection or a reaction to what we just shared. Anna, please, come on in.
Hi, it's Anna.
Anna, please.
This is wonderful because I'm in the world of bridging legacy businesses to regenerative mindset through business. And then a gardener and a mom and in the field of mental health. So this weaves all of those things together. And my comment is just, I mean, this is wonderful. This is so wonderful because this idea of belonging, some people don't, they belong to the earth, as you're saying, but some people don't belong to a location. They belong to, like you say, they're nested in these different activities. They belong through element. A couple of sessions ago, the question in our group meeting was, where do you want your bones to be placed when you die? And I don't have a place. To me, it was the ocean. So I just wanted to broaden that sense of place. For some people, it's very specific. You've been in some area for 30, 50 years or something. For other people, we move around, but there's still that sense of place. You can still know that sense of place through your alive work. I just wanted to say that. Because I think that's what you're really addressing.
Yeah, what I think is important is to find where you belong. There's a saying I grew up with is your home is where you hang your hat, something they say in places like Texas and Oklahoma. And where you hang your hat might be next to your horse out on the plains. Where you hang your hat may be next to the bones of your mother. Like you see, home is a relational place. And what's important is that relational place knows that it's related to the planet. That's the connection that's often missing. And so, which is just another way of agreeing with you. So absolutely, thank you for bringing that in. Are there any other questions or comments, reflections that someone would like to share? Just raise your hand. Or are we merely meditating? Just, ooh, Noah, please come on in.
Hey there, Joe. I just wanted to reflect. I found it inspirational how you shared about a lot of your friends and what the work they're doing. Because when I found some different eco villages in Costa Rica and started exploring those places and learning about the scope of the regenerative world, I think that's what inspired me most, is learning about how vast this world is, how many different organizations there are, nonprofits, and it just really opened my eyes to how many people around the world are working on this in various different ways. And so I just find it inspirational and, you know, motivational and just interesting, fascinating to learn about, you know, on a local level and on a global level, all the different projects and opportunities there are to get involved. And yeah, so I appreciated this presentation, particularly to see all these different opportunities and just all the different things going on. So thank you for that.
Yeah, one thing I'll say for passing on to Janet is that when we look at the news, which is based on selling advertisements, which is based on a bias that what scares us, makes us angry, and makes us disgusted is more likely to bring us back, and therefore allows us to be exposed to advertisements, that there's a deep bias in what that information ecology is able to show us and what is really happening. And the most important work, there was actually a documentary several years ago called "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised," which is a great documentary about a different topic, but for those of you who are interested. But this revolution, when I was interviewed by Patrick Farnsworth, he said, "Joe, you're part of this like secret social movement that no one knows about." And I was like, yeah, and let's keep it secret. Let's keep it below the radar of civilization. And so for us to see amongst each other how to find it is deeply healing. And it's not that we like keep it secret. It's that there's actually not good ways to tell it because the media ecology is really biased against it. So we have to tell it to each other and invite more people in. So thank you for that, Noah. It's just so spot on. Janet.
I wanted to share real quickly, just two organizations that have inspired me. If people have not heard of them, is GEN, which is the Global Eco Village Network, and New Mundo, which is a decentralized platform for discovering eco villages and retreat spaces in different holistic centers. So yeah, thanks, Joe.
No, thanks for those, Noah. They're both great networks. I would even call them organizations.
Yeah, networks, yeah.
Yeah. Janet, on to you. Hello.
Hi. I was late arriving. I'm eager to hear the beginning of this webinar, but I am very deeply moved by the part that I did hear and most affected by the story of the children doing interviews and making documentaries and the healing for the father of recognizing, you know, he passed on what was done to him. And I just want to express my gratitude to you, Joe, for your ability repeatedly to talk about these ideas and concepts and make them so practical. Like, this is how we do it minute to minute through the day. And I feel a sense of belonging. My sense of belonging is deepening as a result of your ability to do that. And to think about being part of a group that is truly focused locally and a part of what's happening globally to help change this world. I don't have any words to express how much I appreciate getting to be here and being part of that. Thank you.
Well, I just want to say how I just watch all of us being moved by the depth of how clearly you feel and express, Janet. It's just so beautiful. And just how important it is for us to have you here with us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Here. Are there any other comments or reflections or questions that anyone has? If not, we can do a little closing. Oh no, Brian, please come on in. Oops.
I was just about to put into the chat a link for the video with the kids that you mentioned, but I was looking for a, a, a version of that had the English subtitles that you mentioned, and I'm not finding that. Although I found another YouTube video that suggests that it's possible to take it. That video is showing the Spanish. So there's like a Spanish transcript and how to actually create English subtitles, but that would be the producer basically. So is there a way for this group to kind of facilitate any of that, or can we do anything with that on the spot?
Some of the videos allow you to turn on closed captioning, but those would generally be in the same language.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm not sure, but we could definitely put it out for someone who has the time that's bilingual.
I'll go ahead and post it to the chat, just in case anybody wants to maybe work with it or whatever. Okay.
Thank you for that, Brian.
Sure.
And Megan, come on in. Hello, hello.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Joe. This is very inspiring. And it's very timely for me. And this might be something to put into the community calls, but I'm just wondering what observations or comments you have on the process of finding that place. And I mean, both the, geographically place and the, skill set and things to contribute. Because I personally have opened a lot of space up for myself for choices around that. And I'm trying to decide what comes next. So it's really, of course, this perfect Earth Regenerators comes along right as I'm doing that anyway. So like I say, maybe it's for the community calls, but I wonder if you have any thoughts on a good process to use. I'm currently kind of journaling and making lots of lists and ideas, and not sure how to get it to land.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways to explore this. I'll just give one because it's also related to the pro-social framework, which is in contextual behavioral science, there's a body of practice called acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT. So there's a thing called the ACT matrix, acceptance and commitment therapy matrix. And it's a tool you can use to do this. And it's actually really simple. You create a horizontal line where everything above the line is visible behaviors and below the line is internal subjective experiences. And the vertical line is one side is everything you'd want to avoid, and the other is everything you'd be attracted to, or everything you'd want more of. And with that, that creates 4 quadrants, it's a matrix. And you can do a really nice, simple exercise, which is for the quadrant that's visible behaviors that you want less of, you can ask yourself, who is someone I know that I definitely don't want to be like? And what are some of the things you might see them do? You might see them interrupting someone, for example, or you might see them lying, or you might see them bragging about themselves. Whatever those things are, you write them down. And then in the bottom quadrant below it, the subjective experiences, you say, well, what is that person valuing, or what are they embodying? Oh, they're being greedy, they're being selfish, whatever it is, and you write them there. And then for the other side, ask yourself, who is someone that I really admire, that I want to be like? What are some things you'd see them doing? And then what are some of the values that they embody would be in the bottom. And the reason to do this is that this gives you a way of feeling into your own body what kind of person you want to be more like and what kind of person you want to be less like, and which values you do care for and which ones you don't. And that starts to create a map inside your own body as you think about, like, well, imagine myself doing the things this person does that I don't like. How do I feel about that? Do I ever do those things? Ooh, let's be honest. Sometimes I do interrupt people and I don't like it. Or am I really like this kind of person I want to be more like? How often? Or am I not like them often enough? And this, what it does is it helps you get more clear on what you really care about and what is your personal purpose. So it's really, this gives you an internal roadmap for how you want to change yourself, for how you want to be the better you that you want to be. And this exercise is helpful because where you belong in the world is partly the question, who am I? Who am I really? Who am I in my heart? And so that personal purpose is a big part of who you are. but it's actually a little bit subtle. So we need some ways to help us see it. And part of the way we see it is by seeing what we want less of in our life and what we want more of in our life. So that's one little piece. That self-knowledge, that piece of self-knowledge is really a big deal. So there are a lot more things in that, but that's one that I've used and I've suggested to people before, and I think it's really helpful. So I don't know if that's helpful for you, but I hope it is. Brian, welcome back. What can we do this time?
It's like I never left.
Just moving screens around.
Something just occurred to me, Joe, and this is Earth Regenerators is such a safe place for me, and it's one of about three groups. Arguably, of those three groups, I feel most comfortable and safest in this space. I'm very appreciative to the community for that. But kind of as a matter of expressing what is of greatest kind of like conscience to me, my instincts are just screaming at me that in order to best kind of nurture this work, Earth regeneration, there is a huge underlying gender component that is just virtually, as I'm starting to kind of been trained in co-sensing in group work, and as I begin to introduce that idea into group context, people are almost running from it. It is the elephant that they make disappear in order to do something that's more concrete, or something that is more unifying, perhaps. But I just wanted to share that here, just to get any kind of feedback or response on, because I just know that's what's on my plate. I don't know how to, kind of what to do with it.
Well, I'll just tell one little story. Here in Barichara, there's an organization called Korasoma. And Korasoma is a group of 3 women: Margarita, who you've all heard me talk about before, Gabriela, and Claudia. And one of the activities they organize that is absolutely transformational is they call it Círculos de Palabras por Mujeres. So it's talking circles for women. They just go out into the countryside and they have women sit in a circle and they talk about whatever they want to talk about. But there are 3 trained therapists who work with trauma who are sitting in the circle with these groups of women. And the most powerful transformational work in this territory is coming from those women. It's from that network of women. And there are lots of good men. You saw some good men that I showed in the presentation, but all of those men are supported by circles of women. And I'm going to give one concrete example of that. Our Centropic Agroforestry group that's creating a learning center, I'll name them: Manuela, woman; Ceci, woman; Tanya, woman; Margarita, woman; Natalia, woman; Paco, man; Joe, man. And that's because there are 5 women who are organizing to manifest all of the work, and our teacher happens to be a guy. And so this is typical of these groups. It's not because we're looking for gender balance. We don't look for it that way. It's just that's what is emerging, is that the women have been coming together and doing what women have done in traditional cultures forever, which is they talk to each other and they nurture their communities. It's what women have done forever in the human lineage. And that's what the women are doing. And it is so fundamental to all of this work. And it's actually helped lead to a group of men's circles that were started because the women's circles were so powerful for the women. They tell their husbands and their friends, and the guys were like, we want this too. And we need men's circles. Seriously, we need men's circles that talk about something other than professional football, please, for crying out loud. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, it's real. This is a big deal. So I'm just validating what you're saying. Super, super important. And the work of Korasoma, just like, if you were here day in and day out for weeks and months at a time, and if you saw how many women just come around in pain and struggling from something going on, and how they help each other, but in a way that builds community. And it's that process that's laying the foundation for most of this to happen. It's extremely important. And women's work is invisible, not even because people don't talk about it, but because it's relational. Being relational means if you're not in the relationships, you don't feel it. And so being relational just means it happens in the space between the visible structures, which is why the sacred feminine is about the formless. It's not that it's formless, it's that you just can't see its form. It's not visibly formed. It very much has a form. And this is really important. And so just naming, like, my work with water is connecting to the sacred feminine. And the sacred feminine is how the formless gives form to life and land. That's what working with water is. So this idea of working with women as leaders, cultivating gender balance and inclusion, the sacred feminine, all of these things, they're like deeply, deeply important. And I would just say that if you're doing regenerative work, they're there somewhere, is what I would say. Whether they're made visible or not, they're there somewhere. They're just essential. So Brian, thank you for bringing that up. It's really, really important. I want to just honor the sense that we're at week 7. We have 1 week to go in the learning journey. And where we're moving toward in this learning journey is just a deeper felt understanding, even where you don't have to be visibly clear and like strategy and plan, but just a deeper felt sense of how do we support each other, or how do we get the support that we need? Because being an Earth Regenerator is done together. Even the picture of me planting a tree had Sebastian behind the camera. You know, like, we're together. It's just so important. And I hope that today's webinar of just seeing as Noah said, you know, this like inspiring set of diverse people doing beautiful things. Maybe you'll see some Earth Regenerators in your community that you didn't realize were Earth Regenerators until now. Because you see, they don't have to call themselves an Earth Regenerator. The name doesn't even matter. You can have someone call themselves an Earth Regenerator and be lying through their teeth. It's not the term, it's the relationship to the sacred and service to life. Which is why anyone, including our dear friend Nelson, can be an Earth Regenerator. And they may not even know it. But if we're helping them to be an Earth Regenerator, the way we negotiated that land purchase, the place that we've come to by having it being stalled and slowed down and disrupted has given us time to build these relationships. Nelson and I are friends on Facebook, and we met today. He said, I saw that bald guy that was here in town, talking about Willem, and all the things you guys were doing is just wonderful. And I'm like, at first he just friended me on Facebook to be sure he was going to get his money and see if he could get me to buy another piece of land. And now he's stalking me to be inspired about landscape regeneration. So we just can't guess. We can't guess where it's going to come from. And that's why the ability to find and give and be inspiration is so important. An Earth Regenerator is someone who is acting in service to life, which means life is flowing through them, and you will feel that aliveness. You will feel the aliveness in that person, and you'll be attracted to them because we're attracted to aliveness. You'll be like, I want to be around this person. They make me feel good. I want to live like this. I want to imitate something they do, which means if you're an Earth Regenerator, you'll be the same way for people around you. And this is how we spread Earth Regeneration, by being Earth Regeneration. And so maybe as you take a walk later today, or lay in some warm water in a bath, or whatever you do to just ground and feel into yourself, as you're laying down to go to sleep before your eyes close, just ask yourself, who are the Earth Regenerators you know? And maybe, like me, If you did that, you might end up not being able to fall asleep and stay up a little too late because you just can't stop remembering more and more people. And you realize how unalone we actually are in this, how together we actually could be by simply seeing it and naming it. If we simply see it and name it, we'll see it and we'll name it, and then we will be named. For those of you who remember your Old Testament, Genesis 2 was the story of Adam naming the world into being, because the naming of things is the acknowledgement of their relationship and their place in the world. So by naming things into being, we're recognizing that they're part of the world and we're giving them their place, which can be done badly and oppressively and all of that. But also, if we don't do it, we're lost. If we don't know how to name the relationships that are sacred to us, we are lost. And if we can name them, we can feel them. And if we can feel them, we can relate to them. And then we're not alone ever again. And that's the power of being an Earth Regenerator. So thank you all for being here today, for allowing me to celebrate how awesome my life is because of my wonderful friends. And I look forward to just hearing from each of you what bubbles up in this inquiry that you're now embarking on. So thank you very much, everyone.